Hey guys, tonight we watch bamboo swell. You're standing deep in the cool hush of a 19th century Javanese forest, somewhere between the edge of memory and the first hint of rain. The leaves above sway like lazy fans, cicadas murmur in the background, and somewhere nearby, something pops. Not a firecracker, not a snapping twig, it's bamboo. A hollow green stalk expanding with moisture and making a noise that's barely a sound and more like a feeling. A dull crackle, like a secret shared between tree and sky. The villagers around you freeze, heads tilted, and just like that they nod. "It will rain," one of them says. You probably won't survive this story. By the way, it's deeply uneventful. You're going to learn about hollow sticks. You'll listen to weather logic based on plant acoustics. At one point, you may hear someone utter the phrase barometric bamboo resonance and feel your soul gently leave your body. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're falling asleep to history's least urgent footnotes. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is roughly 1880. The place Central Java, an island of towering volcanoes, saturated rice terraces, and one of the most quietly sophisticated meteorological systems to ever hide in plain sight. No telescopes, no satellites, no iPhone app with a smug rain cloud icon, just a piece of bamboo, split and propped beside a wooden hut, waiting patiently to say something. You wander through a village where farmers have arranged cut bamboo tubes like sleepy sentries along the path. Some lean against fence posts, others lie flat under awnings, but they're all waiting. Because here's the trick, bamboo doesn't just sit in humidity, it reacts. As moisture in the air rises, especially in the heavy hours before tropical rain, the fibers of dry bamboo absorb water and begin to swell. If the tube has been split and dried just right, it will flex and pop, sometimes subtly, sometimes with a clear, sharp crack. And to the trained ear, that sound means, don't plant today, or maybe prepare the roof. Historians still argue whether this practice developed in Java independently or evolved from earlier Austronesian techniques brought by ancient mariners who noticed their canoe poles popping before a storm. Some say it was purely agricultural wisdom passed down through oral tradition. Others claim it was half science, half spiritual, like most truly effective things tend to be. And your delightfully odd fringe detail tonight. Some villagers, in particularly humid valleys, swore certain bamboo tubes would sing a high-pitched warble just before a typhoon, like a rain flute trying to whisper its warning. You crouch beside one now. It's silent. Still. But you can feel the weight in the air, the soft pull of storm clouds just out of sight. Someone nearby flicks water from a leaf and mutters, "It will crack before sunset." No one checks the sky. No one sniffs the air. They wait for the bamboo. And when it speaks, they'll know. Because in a world of monsoons and miracle harvests, the most reliable weather report might just be the one that grows wild in your backyard. You move deeper into the village, toes squishing into the soft, packed earth as fronds arch overhead, and the scent of damp thatch mixes with roasted peanuts and the faint, ever-present whisper of river water somewhere nearby. Everything feels like it's waiting the clouds, the air, the dogs napping in doorways. And as you sit on a wide bamboo bench, still warm from the morning sun, someone places an object in your hands, a coconut bowl, empty, smooth, balanced. Then they hand you a pebble. Drop it in when the crickets go silent. The elder says. You stare at the coconut, the pebble, the deeply serious face of the person who just gave you homework from the weather gods. Welcome to the pre-bamboo weather toolkit, a glorious blend of sound, superstition, and coconut acoustics. Before hollow stalks became the rain prophets of choice, villagers had already developed a remarkable system for sensing when the skies would break open. It was less about instruments and more about observation. You learn that when the frogs call in short bursts and the crickets stop chirping altogether, rain is likely. But if the frogs are silent and the crickets chirp off beat, you're told this with absolute conviction. You should take the laundry down now. Historians still argue how much of this early weather lore was derived from keen ecological awareness versus sheer generational storytelling bravado. Some scholars argue that over centuries, villagers simply learned how to hear the land's mood. Others believe it was structured knowledge embedded into folklore as mnemonic tricks. And here's your fringe delight for this section. Certain households kept tiny jars of fermented anchovy paste under their stairs, not to eat, but to smell. When the paste soured too quickly, it was considered a sign of fast approaching rain. If it fizzed typhoon, if it burst, move inland immediately. You walk into a small bamboo hut where a woman sits cross-legged, her eyes half closed, listening, not to the sky, to the termites. Yes, termites. Apparently, these tiny wood chewers dig differently when rain is coming. You press your ear against the bamboo wall as she gestures. There it is, a softer rustling, more frantic. Flood in 2 days, she murmurs. I already told the rice boys. You nod like that made sense, because here it kind of does. And then comes the coconut again. Someone nudges you. The crickets have stopped. You drop the pebble. It rings out a single dull plonk. Everyone around you nods. You're not sure what it means, but they are. And now the bamboo tubes start humming. Not cracking yet, just humming. Because sound is memory. Sound is data. And long before rain gauges and Doppler radar, sound was enough. You sit by the path as a boy runs by, holding a banana leaf over his head and shouting, "It's gonna crack before dinner." No one laughs, because the coconut said so, and the frogs never lie. You wake to the sound of chickens arguing, not violently, just the casual clucking sort of disagreement that says, "There's definitely a worm here, and I found it first." The morning fog clings to the thatched rooftops like a scarf nobody asked for. And the sky above looks pale, smeared with clouds like someone forgot to finish painting. But the villagers aren't looking up. They're looking at bamboo, propped up in rows, leaned against hut corners, balanced on fence posts like sleepy guards on weather duty. These aren't musical instruments or tools or traps. They're the forecasting team. Because you've arrived at the moment when bamboo tubes became meteorologists, you trail behind a farmer bare feet, rolled sarong, face creased with the calm confidence of someone who once beat a Dutch barometer in a prediction contest. He stops in front of a cluster of bamboo tubes cut short, slit along one side and dried until they sing, then thud, then hum. He taps one with his finger, listens, cocks his head. Not today, he mutters. Another elder joins in, lifting a tube to sniff it. Yes, sniff it. Too dry. He agrees, maybe tomorrow. The southern wind hasn't turned. You're trying very hard not to ask questions too loudly, for fear of offending the tubes. Here's what you learn when cut just right, hollowed, seasoned, and left to rest. The internal fibers of a bamboo stalk react dramatically to humidity. In high moisture conditions, they swell. This causes the tube to subtly shift, strain, and eventually release tension with the sudden crack. And that crack, that's your forecast. That's your thunder preview. That's the countryside's very own symphony of precipitation. Historians still argue when this practice began. Some believe it was a pre-Islamic tradition from the animist era, when nature was read like a living scroll. Others think it's more recent, perhaps developed in the 18th or 19th century, as a hyper-local innovation passed from one curious farmer to another. And your quirky fringe gem today? A Javanese folktale tells of a man who carried a bamboo tube around his waist for 10 years, claiming it whispered rain dates to him in his dreams. His neighbors mostly avoided eye contact. You crouch by the tubes, watch as a boy rearranges them according to wind direction. They crack different if they face west. He explains, west cracks are faster, north ones are lower. You nod solemnly, filing that away like you'll absolutely use it the next time someone mentions barometric pressure. A woman nearby adds coconut ash around the base of one tube. Keeps the ants out, she says. They chew the ends, and then it cries wrong. You don't even flinch at this sentence anymore. You trail a small group of villagers to a shrine on the edge of a ridge. Bamboo tubes are tied to its frame like wind chimes with a purpose. As the breeze shifts, one lets out a low, wooden groan. The priest listens. Rain tomorrow, he confirms. Bring in the laundry. No one argues. The Dutch colonials, now and when they arrived, wrote about native customs involving split bamboo, usually with condescension and occasional curiosity. But over time, some began keeping their own tubes unofficially. One account from 1893 includes a sketch of a colonial officer standing shirtless beside a bamboo rack, hand to his ear, listening like it's the stock market. And maybe it was. Rice needed timing, travel needed clarity, and bamboo, of all things, told the truth. You walk back into the village as the sun rises higher. A tube finally pops sharp and echoing. Dogs bark. A child yells, "I told you." And just like that, umbrellas are found and bets are settled. Because when the bamboo talks, you listen. You sit beneath a low awning now, feet tucked under a woven mat, watching the steam rise from a bowl of ginger tea as someone slices bananas into careful circles beside you. A rooster struts past with absolutely no idea that bamboo just stole his job. Because today, the villagers aren't guessing. They're waiting for the crack. And sure enough, pop, a deep, resonant crack echoes from the corner of a small wooden porch, where a bamboo tube has finally swelled past its limit and released its tension with dramatic flair. The noise is somewhere between a muffled drumbeat and a stubborn knuckle cracking, and it doesn't go unnoticed. A few heads turn. A child looks up from sweeping. Someone mutters, "There it is." Because here in the late hours before a tropical downpour, you've entered the most exciting part of the day. Crackles in the night, forecasts by morning. The tubes are aligned in clusters. Some are half buried in ash to slow their swelling. Others are tied vertically against wooden posts to pick up wind shifts. And when the humidity hits that perfect tipping point, the cracks start loud, sudden, sometimes one after the other like bamboo popcorn from the sky gods. You listen, then you count. 1 crack light rain. 2 likely drizzle. 5 or more in the span of a night. You're not going anywhere tomorrow? The locals call this rhythm swara bambu, the bamboo's voice. And it isn't just a single tone. Oh no. You're told by a man stirring sweetened rice with one hand and gesturing with the other that there are crack dialects. Sharp, tight pops come from younger tubes. Older ones hum a bit first. Split tubes emit a sharp whip snap. Whole ones thud like a soft warning. Historians still argue whether the cracking was interpreted more as a mechanical sign or a spiritual one. Some early anthropologists wrote that villagers believed the bamboo was speaking on behalf of the rain spirits. Others claimed it was simply observational meteorology wrapped in poetic habit. But here's your fringe tale tonight. One village elder swore he could predict exactly how many ducks would lay eggs based on how early the bamboo cracked before sunrise. His neighbors disagreed until he got it right 3 mornings in a row. You lie back under a lean-to where 3 tubes are tied horizontally. Each has a tiny notch carved into the side, like a recorder without holes. It makes the crack echo, a girl explains. More dramatic. The spirits like the drama. You believe her? You absolutely do. Someone brings out a folded bamboo mat, unfurls it beside the tubes, and settles in for what they call a weather nap. A short rest before the skies open up if the tubes keep cracking. You'll need energy to shift the harvest tarps. You try it. You lie down, eyes half shut, listening. Crack. Pop. A pause, then very faintly grung. Someone sits bolt upright. The deep belly one that means big rain. People begin to move. Water pots are covered, roofs rechecked. One boy races off to bring in his goat, shouting. The belly tube never lies. And just like that, without a forecast, without a satellite, without an app or an air pressure chart, an entire village shifts into preparation mode because the tubes cracked and the sky will answer. You sip the rest of your tea, its steam twirling with the wind. And above you the tubes begin to hum again, like they know what's coming. You rise at dawn, the cool air still clinging to your skin as you walk deeper into the village. The previous night's bamboo chorus still reverberates in your mind, and now you find yourself following the well-worn path toward the central communal area. Here, among the thatched huts and muddy courtyards, a remarkable innovation in ancient meteorology unfolds, one that transforms raw, unpredictable sound into a sort of language all its own. This is where villagers began building a better bamboo barometer. Under the gentle glow of early light, you approach a cluster of bamboo tubes arranged along a low, rough-hewn stone wall. Each tube has been meticulously notched, angled, and even tied with strips of palm fiber. The arrangement seems almost musical, a carefully orchestrated display of nature's own apparatus, refined by generations of keen observation. A group of elderly men and women huddle around them, discussing the nuances with the seriousness of politicians deliberating over state secrets. They share knowing glances and slight smiles, as though these bamboo relics hold an ancient magic only they are privy to. One man, his face as creased as the well-worn tablets that record the village's stories, steps forward and taps one tube lightly with a small wooden mallet. You hear a soft, almost musical tap, followed by a faint reverberation. He pauses, listening intently. That notch, he murmurs, means the humidity is rising. Expect a drizzle in a few hours. His voice is measured. He speaks with the assurance of one who has spent his entire life attuned to the language of bark and air. Curious. You wander closer to the tubes. You see how each one bears small notches carved with deliberate precision. Some tubes show a series of evenly spaced marks. Others have irregular notching. as if their carvers tried to account for differences in local wind patterns or perhaps even individual personality quirks among the older generation. A young girl sitting nearby dutifully helps her grandfather secure a loose strip of bamboo around one of the tubes. "Grandpa, why do you always fix these so carefully?" she asks, her voice soft yet full of innocent urgency. He looks at her with a half smile. Each notch is a word. He explains, and together they tell the story of the sky. When the bamboo cracks, it speaks, but when it's carefully maintained, it tells us exactly when we might need to cover our rice fields or fetch the water. His eyes twinkle as he adds, "It's like having a weather app, but one you can hold in your hand." You smile at the analogy. Modern weather forecasts with satellites and digital sensors seem so distant compared to the gentle artistry of these bamboo contraptions. In this world, nature is listened to directly by heart, by intuition, by the scratch of a stone on bamboo. You notice how one tube in particular, a slightly older specimen with more notches than its neighbors, is positioned against the entrance of a small temple. A plaque beside it, weathered but legible, states barometer of the gods, maintained by sacred hands. Whether that's literal or symbolic, you're not sure, but it adds an air of gravitas to the whole affair. Historians still argue whether these indigenous techniques evolved solely from environmental necessity or were subtly influenced by earlier Austronesian weather lore. Some argue that isolated communities stumbled upon the secret by pure trial and error, observing that when bamboo was left out, its sound changed in predictably human ways. Others assert that structured, ritualized measurement systems were embedded in oral tradition, passed down in the lullabies recited under starlit skies. Either perspective suggests that these villagers possessed an extraordinary relationship with nature, one measured in notches rather than numbers. One particularly animated elder, his voice strong despite his frail frame, recounts a tale of a time when a new batch of bamboo tubes was installed. "My father," he says, "believed that the tubes, if not properly maintained, would mislead us into thinking the rain was coming when it wasn't. And if the rain didn't come, our crops would suffer." He shakes his head as if remembering a great tragedy. "So we learned, slowly, to carve them, to fix them, to treat each one as a sacred instrument. Every tube was unique, like a fingerprint of the sky. Nearby, a group of teenagers experiments playfully, running their fingers along the smooth surfaces of freshly notched tubes. Their laughter rings out as one of them pretends to read the tubes like fortunes. Your tube says, 'Bring an umbrella and extra sandals.' One quips, causing a ripple of light-hearted jokes. Their levity contrasts with the solemnity of the older generation, yet it embodies the same deep trust in this natural barometer. You stroll along, noticing how various families have integrated these bamboo stations into their daily lives. Outside one modest home, a woman installs a tiny bamboo tube between two vertical posts at the doorway. "For the kids," she explains casually, "so they know when to run inside for supper." Not far away, a farmer has built a small makeshift workshop around his own set of tubes, complete with chalk marks on the ground and an array of wooden tools for maintenance. The practical ingenuity here is palpable over the years. The techniques have been refined, improved, an organic engineering marvel developed with the simplest of materials and the most profound of needs. As the day continues, you find yourself sitting on a low stone step, jotting notes in a small journal. The sun's warm glow mixes with the earthy smells of bamboo, damp clay, and incense from the nearby temple. You marvel at how an ordinary plant, a bamboo tube, became the village's trusted oracle. In modern terms, it's like having a smartphone that can predict rain with no battery required, just nature, sharpened by human hands. One final detail captures your imagination. An inscription on one of the oldest tubes reads, "When the crack speaks, the gods answer." It's a cryptic line, yet it encapsulates everything: the intertwining of practicality, spirituality, and community wisdom. Whether one believes in divine intervention or pure science, the message is clear. This bamboo is more than a tool. It's a storyteller of the skies, a silent scribe recording the language of nature. You lean back, feeling the weight of centuries in that simple, humble notching on bamboo. The air grows warmer as the day unfolds, and with it, a sense of continuity of ancient knowledge passed down through tactile tradition. You know that every village, every family who has ever depended on these tubes has contributed a verse to this ongoing ballad of rain and hope. And in this unhurried way, with nothing but bamboo and nature, the villagers find clarity, they listen, they adjust, and they live. You trudge along the rim of a rice paddy now, where the water gleams like molten silver under the soft press of morning clouds. Your feet slosh gently in the edge furrows. The sky above is bloated with humidity. The air is thick enough to chew. You can't help but glance at the nearby bamboo tube leaning against a scarecrow's post, waiting to see if it says anything before your knees give up. Because today, you're starting to understand why predicting rain was everything. Why farmers in 19th century Indonesia watched bamboo, not because it was quaint or fun or the only thing on hand, but because their lives literally depended on it. This isn't the kind of farming where rain is a bonus. It's the kind where rain is the boss. Rice, that deceptively innocent grain that sits in your bowl without a fuss, is one of the most timing-obsessed crops on Earth. Plant too early, the seedlings drown. Plant too late, the soil dries and cracks. Miss time of floods start over. If you're lucky, if not, go hungry. So when the skies rule everything, the most valuable tool in your shed isn't a blade or a plow. It's knowledge, which, in this case, comes from a hollow stalk of grass that goes pop when it gets moist enough. You pass a small hut where a family is huddled over a low table, mapping their planting schedule. A child recites 2 cracks before rooster crow, 3 days of rain to follow. The mother nods approvingly and adjusts a carved wooden calendar accordingly. Historians still argue whether the bamboo system developed independently in each valley or spread slowly across Java and Sumatra through trade and oral storytelling. Some point to similar methods in Vietnam and the Philippines, suggesting that across the monsoon belt, humidity had always spoken to people. Others argue the system's precision hints at surprisingly early experimentation, perhaps even parallel to the region's older shadow clock methods. Your fringe favorite today. A well-preserved village record from 1847 describes a failed rice cycle where the tubes gave no sound for 5 straight days. The elders blamed it on a cursed tube carved during an eclipse. The tube was burned. The following week, it rained nonstop. Coincidence? The village still debates it. You walk beside a bent-backed farmer now, his feet dark with mud. He gestures toward the horizon. You see that line of gray, he asks? That's not a storm yet. But my bamboo cracked at midnight. So I'll wait. You glance behind him, 3 large paddies, waterlogged but unplanted. So when will you go in, you ask? He squints at the clouds, then at his bamboo post. When the second one cracks, he says, not before. Not again. You pass another family preparing seedlings on palm mats. They don't speak, just point to a small bamboo tube tied to a woven frame. It's split, finely carved, and positioned with the open seam facing northeast toward the wind. You hear it hum, low and eerie. They pause. One of them nods. The work stops. You ask why? The grandmother replies, "That hum means the wind is confused. We wait for a clean crack." You climb a small ridge and look out over the valley, patchwork paddies, scattered huts, half-visible temples, and bamboo tubes leaning in every direction, like green tuning forks pointed at the sky. No wires, no screens, just rain readers and patience. A boy jogs past, holding a bowl of water and a single floating flower. The bloom faced south this morning. He shouts, grinning. The tube popped at dawn. Big rain's coming. You're not even surprised anymore. This is what it means to survive here, not dominating nature, but syncing with it, following its hints, letting the sky speak through things that grow. You step back under an awning just as a low pop echoes down the valley. It's not loud, not dramatic, but everyone hears it. Heads turn, tools pause, and somewhere, rice waits to be planted at just the right moment. You wake to the sound of distant laughter and the low clatter of something wooden tumbling through dirt. You rise slowly, wipe last night's bamboo-scented dreams from your face, and follow the sound down a winding path until you reach a small crowd gathered near the edge of a flooded field. Everyone is staring at a chicken. The chicken is staring at a bamboo tube. And in this particular moment, you are about to witness the most unexpected chapter in meteorological history. The tube that knew too much. It begins like this a few days ago. The village's usual bamboo chorus had fallen eerily silent. No pops, no creaks, not even a sympathetic groan from the temple-mounted tubes. The sky looked innocent. The frogs were lazy. The termites dug at normal speed. And the clouds. They were fluffy, deceptive, smug. Everyone relaxed. Everyone. That is, except one unusually long bamboo tube, strapped to the porch of a woodcarver's home. It began humming softly at midnight. Then it cracked. Once. Then again. Then at 2 a.m. it let out a long, mournful warble that no one had ever heard before. The woodcarver's rooster, whose only job until this moment had been yelling at the sun, lost its mind. It started crowing like the sky was on fire. Villagers woke up. Someone tripped over a rice pot. Children peeked through windows. And the tube, it just sat there, innocent, hollow, very slightly vibrating. By sunrise, half the village had packed up their tools, covered the dry grain, and rolled up their sleeping mats. The other half mocked them gently over breakfast. By noon, the river overflowed. A freak downpour, the kind that rarely arrives in the middle of planting season, turned the entire valley into a sudden soup. Footpaths vanished. Chickens fled. Banana leaves flattened like they owed someone money. But not one item in the woodcarver's house got wet. His was the only bamboo tube that cracked in time. And yes, he knighted the rooster. Well, not officially. But the rooster got a necklace made of corn kernels and a new name, Patir, which means lightning. Historians still argue whether this was a case of freak humidity catching in a uniquely warped tube, or if this was simply confirmation bias with feathers. Some accounts recorded in village scrolls suggest a few elders began calling the tube Pendengar Langet, Sky Listener. Others insist it was a fluke, but no one forgot it. And your fringe fact for today after this incident: a small group of villagers carved the shape of that tube into local temple stones as a kind of low-key monument to rain prediction. The inscription reads, "The bamboo that cracked when nothing else did." You wander past the porch where the tube still rests, now decorated with faded red string and a small carved bird atop its frame. It hasn't cracked again, but people still pat it as they walk by. You sit beside a young boy poking at it with a stick. "My grandfather says it saw the storm before the gods did." He says, "Do you think bamboo can see?" You shrug. Maybe it hears. He thinks about this. Maybe it dreams. A breeze blows and you swear the tube hums ever so faintly. People still argue about how it worked, why it worked, or whether it really did work. But no one ignores the tube anymore. A few families started carving extra long versions. One was placed in the roof of the school. Someone began referring to it as the village's ear. The woodcarver keeps a small diary now. He marks each time the tube cracks, hums, pops, or rattles in the night. His notes are dry, careful, and never boastful. But at the bottom of every page, he writes, "Checked with Patir, confirmed." And as you lean against the bamboo rail, a fresh crack echoes faintly from the mountainside. Everyone pauses. No one moves too fast. Because even now, decades later, when the skies pretend to be innocent and the clouds wear their softest smiles, the villagers know. The tube doesn't lie. You follow the sound of wooden sandals clacking against stone and find yourself weaving through a shaded corridor between government buildings. Their colonial architecture perched stiffly like overdressed guests at a jungle banquet. The air smells faintly of polished brass, ink, and that special kind of bureaucratic mildew that only ever appears in rooms where nothing fun happens. Because this isn't the village anymore. This is the edge of Batavia modern-day Jakarta, and you've wandered straight into the historical moment when Dutch colonial officials started watching bamboo tubes. Not politely, not respectfully, more like curiously, with clipboards. It all started when some low-ranking surveyor was stationed out in the rice fields of central Java, tasked with mapping rainfall and recording harvest yields. His job was mostly to look official while sunburning slowly. And one day, just after a surprise downpour ruined his week's work, he noticed something odd, a line of bamboo tubes outside a villager's home, all split and singing. He jotted a note in the margins of his ledger. Natives appear to listen to tubes before storms. Possibly decorative? Then, 5 months later, a higher-up wrote a more alarmed note. Tube cracked at midnight. Villagers evacuated granary. Flood followed. Coincidence. And then came the debates. Some officials mocked the practice outright. Others got suspicious. One over-enthusiastic Dutch engineer reportedly tried to install a bamboo rack outside his office in Semarang. His assistant described the sound as unpleasantly moist. They both fell ill and blamed the tubes. They never tried again. Historians still argue whether colonial authorities genuinely respected indigenous forecasting or simply documented it out of anthropological obligation. Some accounts suggest bamboo tubes were listed in minor weather reports for inland stations. Others claim it was all dismissed as local color, a pleasant anecdote between complaints about humidity and malaria. But your quirky fringe moment today? A 19th century Dutch medical officer once tried to replicate a bamboo weather station on the second floor of a brick hospital building. It never cracked. He blamed the altitude. Villagers blamed the bricks. You peek into a small, tile-roofed archive where a junior archivist is squinting at a faded letter, written in precise but deeply annoyed Dutch. The translation reads, "Local farmers predicted yesterday's storm with bamboo. Official barometer failed to register. Am reconsidering pension options." You stifle a laugh. Further along, you find an old classroom where Javanese children, pressed into colonial education, are reciting a weather rhyme in Dutch. But one child has smuggled in a bamboo splinter, which he taps on the desk every time the teacher says cloud. His classmates giggle. He is not corrected. Even here, the old ways hold on. Outside the colonial governor's residence, a gardener tends to a small courtyard grove. A single bamboo tube hangs from a tree, almost hidden behind the fronds. "Old habit," the gardener murmurs when he catches your glance. "Still cracks before the rains." You head back through the marketplace, passing both colonial officials and local merchants trading goods beneath awnings reinforced with tarps and, yes, bamboo rafters. The rafters hum quietly. A few shopkeepers glance up. One reaches for her covered rice cakes without needing to look at the sky. And you realize something. Even empires, with their guns and papers and medals, eventually start listening, however reluctantly, to the things that make sound when the air thickens and the frogs go silent. Even bureaucracy, dressed in uniforms and monocles, can't ignore a crack that always comes right before the rain. You sit in a stone alcove, resting beside a Dutch-built drain that channels runoff into a canal. It's cracked with age, mossy and eroded, but still working, like the bamboo. And you think maybe history is less about who writes it down and more about who hears it first. The storm comes quietly now. The clouds don't roar, but one bamboo tube hidden in the eaves lets out a soft, satisfied pop, and the rain answers. You're still in the lowlands, walking down a muddy path as raindrops begin their lazy descent, one here, two there, then a synchronized patter on banana leaves overhead. The bamboo around you is glistening, beads of water rolling along its stalks like silver ants marching toward a promise. Up ahead, a cluster of people stands under a raised veranda, eyes turned skyward, lips curled in that quiet smirk people wear when their bet wins. Because today is market day, and the Dutch meteorologist said clear skies. But old Pakdarmo said no. Pakdarmo said the tubes cracked, twice, just after midnight. Which brings you to a small, remarkable piece of history known locally as the day bamboo beat the barometer. You make your way toward the veranda, joining a loosely formed circle of onlookers, half villagers, half junior colonial officers, all damp. At the center of the crowd stands a table with a wooden frame displaying a proper imported brass barometer, polished and smug. Next to it, 3 bamboo tubes, tied together with fraying rattan and perched like aging songbirds waiting to be proven right. And oh, how right they were. The day before, a formal debate had unfolded in the town square. Rain was forecast by no one. The Dutch barometer needle pointed to settled. The skies were blue, the frogs were quiet, and then, just after dusk, the bamboo cracked, twice, loud, confident. Pakdarmo, a retired farmer with impeccable ears and the unwavering posture of someone who once told a volcano when it could erupt, declared rain before midday tomorrow. The Dutch laughed. They issued a sunshine bulletin. They planned an inspection tour. By 11:20 a.m. it poured, and by noon, the barometer still hadn't moved. Historians still argue whether this event truly embarrassed the colonial scientific community or if it simply became a charming footnote filed under anomalies. Some records refer to unexpected tropical irregularities, while others cite unreliable local behavior, which may refer to either the villagers or the weather itself. And your quirky fringe detail today? A Dutch officer in attendance, Captain Van Dyke, allegedly scribbled in his field journal, Bamboo 2 Science 0. I retire in disgrace. He didn't, but the phrase made it into at least one tavern song. You sit beside Pa Darmo now, who is dabbing his forehead with a woven cloth and sipping sweet tea like a man who just beat the European Enlightenment with a stalk of grass. He leans over and says, without looking, science is useful. But the tubes are older? You believe him. Nearby, a group of school children draws diagrams of the event. One girl labels her picture Bamboo Prophet. Another writes Dutch tool broken above the barometer, which still refuses to acknowledge what's happening. A second crack sounds from under the eaves. Everyone looks up. Pak Darmo chuckles. The rain gets heavier. Someone starts a bet about whether it'll flood by evening. The bamboo tubes don't answer. They've said what they needed to. You return to the market, now half covered in woven mats and improvised banana leaf umbrellas. The vendors are prepared. They always are. Because when the tubes speak, people listen. And you think again maybe the real test of science isn't precision. Maybe it's reliability. And if a tube cracked in the night while your imported brass device was asleep, well, maybe it's time to get yourself a bamboo tube, or at least a chicken that respects one. You wake before dawn to the sound of fabric rustling and low voices, early market chatter, soft prayers, and one very persistent man trying to convince a neighbor that his goat can, in fact, sense thunder. You sit up slowly, stretch, and glance toward the horizon where the first light smears the clouds in streaks of orange and reluctant blue. But what draws your attention isn't the sky. It's the sound coming from a bamboo grove just outside the village. A slow, deliberate crack, then silence, then a second, quieter pop, followed by a kind of deep sighing moan, the sort of sound that makes even birds pause mid-preen. Today, you've stumbled upon one of the most cherished, most carefully guarded treasures in this region, the Bamboo Almanac of Central Java. This isn't a book. It's not bound in leather or inked in calligraphy. It's a series of split bamboo tubes arranged along a sacred pathway, each one marked not just by notches and carvings, but by names. Beautiful, poetic, oddly specific names. One tube is labeled the dancer who sings in drizzle, another he who pops before the moon turns. A third sleeps all month, screams on solstice. Each name reflects a pattern, a personality, a seasonal rhythm recognized and passed down through generations. You kneel beside a local elder, thin as a reed, skin like driftwood, smile like he just caught you thinking the bamboo doesn't matter. We listen, he says simply, and we remember. Historians still argue whether this oral calendrical system qualifies as meteorological science or cultural folklore. But you know what the villagers call it, the weather choir? Each bamboo tube has been tuned not just by its thickness and cut, but by its age. The older tubes crack lower, slower, softer. The younger ones brighter, faster, more erratic. Some are passed down within families. One tube here is over 70 years old. Another is new, carved last season by a boy who claimed the frogs gave him permission. Every morning, a small group of elders walks the path, pausing before each tube. They record what they hear if they hear anything on palm leaf slips or, more often, in memory. You don't write what the wind sings. One woman says, you carry it in your bones. Here's your delightfully odd fringe fact today in one 19th century Javanese village. Each crackling tube was assigned a corresponding moon phase and was used to determine when to hold marriage ceremonies. One couple delayed their wedding by a week when the laughing one cracked too early. It rained precisely on their original date. The groom never questioned the bamboo again. You follow the elders down the grove, listening closely. Crack. A woman nods. That one always speaks 3 days before a heavy rain. An old man smiles. Good for planting ginger, bad for fishing. One tube doesn't sound at all. Someone frowns. She's tired this year. You try to read a pattern, any pattern, but it's impossible. There's too much nuance, too many variables. It's like listening to an orchestra where every musician plays when they feel like it, and yet somehow the song still makes sense. The elder beside you touches one tube gently. She was my mother's, he says. She cracked for my birth, and she cracked the day I first harvested rice. You nod, unsure what to say. Another tube lets out a deep, almost humorous plonk. The group laughs. She disagrees with the last one. Someone says, because yes, here. The bamboo doesn't just sing. It argues. You pass a final, thick-stalked tube set beside a mossy stone. No name. No markings. Just silent. Still bamboo. She never cracks. The elder whispers. Only hums when lightning's near. You ask if it's true. He shrugs. We'll find out. The morning fades. The wind shifts. The path empties. But the bamboo almanac remains. Quiet. Waiting. And ready. Because sometimes wisdom isn't written in pages. It's echoed in wood. You follow the trail out of the almanac grove and into a quieter part of the village where the homes are smaller. The fences woven low, and the smoke from morning fires curls lazily through slanted windows. Here, the paths are swept with bundles of leaves, and chickens waddle with purpose, as if they have appointments. But what draws your attention isn't poultry. It's the women. Old, young, hunched, bustling, all moving with that brisk, practiced calm that suggests they've been awake since before the sun had the nerve to show up. You hear laughter, low voices, the clinking of clay jars, and beneath all that, you hear the unmistakable soft ping of fingers tapping bamboo tubes. Because while the men debate cracks, and the priests bless weather tubes by moon phase, the real bamboo listeners, they're right here. This is the untold story of women, weather, and whispered warnings. You settle near a communal courtyard where 4 women sit in a ring, spinning fibers and swapping news. Beside them, 2 bamboo tubes leaning against a stone pestle. Both tubes are carved finely, with delicate geometric designs spiraling up the sides like vines in a dream. You watch as one woman leans in and presses her cheek to the tube. Not her ear. Her cheek? She waits, then nods. You blink. Humidity. She murmurs. Soft this morning, but it's climbing. Her daughter jots something on a clay tablet nearby. A third woman sets a kettle over the fire. No need to fetch water yet. She adds, it won't rain till tonight. No one disagrees. Historians still argue whether women's contributions to traditional weather lore were actively recorded or simply absorbed into family ritual. Some believe entire bamboo practices were sustained through maternal lines whispered at night, folded into lullabies. Others think women simply listened more quietly and thus were never included in the formal oral traditions preserved by the male elders. But here's your fringe gem in one village. Women used hair combs carved from old bamboo tubes that had cracked during major storms. The combs were considered lucky, especially during childbirth. The belief they've already heard the worst? You sip warm tea with a group of aunties now, watching them reposition their bamboo tubes around the edges of the hearth. Crackle warmth, one says. Different from storm warmth. You pretend to understand? Nearby, a teenage girl sits beside a shorter, fatter tube nestled in a clay pot. She taps the side gently, then again, then listens. She's learning, her mother says proudly. Learning to hear moisture in wood. Learning the difference between surface expansion and deep-set swelling. Learning that sound is more than sound, it's direction. The bamboo doesn't just predict rain, it guides decisions. Whether to wash clothes, hang fish, visit a cousin across the valley, or prepare extra cassava for the next day. One woman holds up a thin reed and grins. This one's named Gossip. She always pops when I'm mad. The others laugh. You pass a tiny bamboo altar tucked behind a house. 2 tubes are bound together with red thread. A small bowl of rice sits beside them, steaming faintly in the morning air. Offerings. Someone explains. For clear signs, it's not a ritual with ceremony. It's everyday reverence. A habit. A quiet pact between those who keep the village fed and the sky that sometimes forgets to behave. You sit under a low awning as a distant tube lets out a soft crunch. Not quite a crack. More of a whispered shrug. The women pause. One murmurs, Delayed. They nod, already recalculating the day's rhythm. Because while the men will argue and the children will run, and the elders will philosophize, these women act, they've always known rain doesn't ask permission. It arrives, and someone has to be ready. So they listen. To the bamboo. To each other. To everything the sky says without saying it. The sun has climbed higher now, its warmth spreading like softened honey over rooftops and cooking fires. You wander past a row of low homes, each with a garden, each with a bamboo tube or 3 tucked under awnings, perched atop fence posts, dangling like charms from rafter beams. The tubes seem to doze in the heat, silent for now, waiting for evening moisture to wake them. But not everyone is waiting. You hear singing soft, rhythmic, echoing from a wooded ridge above the village. It's a kind of chant, wordless but intentional. You climb the path, brushing past ferns and the occasional very unimpressed lizard, until you reach a shaded clearing where something truly unexpected is happening. The bamboo tubes here aren't just tools. They're part of a ritual. You watch as a woman, barefoot and crowned with flowers, circles a cluster of standing tubes arranged in a spiral. At the center, a small bowl filled with rice, banana leaf-wrapped sweets, and a single egg. Incense drifts upward. The air smells like palm sugar, moss, and something faintly storm-like. This is no amateur performance. This is ritual, offering, and weather spirit negotiation. And depending on which villager you ask, it's either mildly charming or extremely necessary. You settle on a mossy rock beside the ceremony's edge as a teenage boy whispers to you. It's for the Penjaga Angin, the Wind Guardian. She sings to it through the tubes. You glance at the woman again. She holds a split bamboo stalk in one hand like a flute, though she never plays it. Instead, she hums beside it, letting her voice drift in and around its hollow chamber. She doesn't speak. The boy adds, only hums. The spirit doesn't like words. Historians still argue whether bamboo forecasting had any formal spiritual backing or was simply surrounded by ritual like many agricultural practices. Some suggest early animist traditions attributed consciousness to trees, plants, and weather itself, especially when those things spoke in sounds. Others believe rituals like this evolved later, more as community theater than theology. But your fringe delight today in one small region of East Java. Villagers created bamboo totems tubes painted with faces, placed on hillsides. They weren't touched, only watched. If one fell over during the dry season, it meant the rain was offended. Back in the clearing, the woman finishes her hum, taps the offering bowl with her stalk, and steps back. A moment later, one of the tubes creaks. Not a crack, just a long, slow, wind-fed moan. The villagers nearby nod. That's the yes. Then they return to daily life, like they didn't just consult with the air. You follow them down the ridge, past more bamboo shrines, some old and cracked, some freshly carved. One hangs over a spring, dripping water into a stone basin below. A girl nearby explains. This one drinks. When it's full, it spits. That means rain is coming. You check. It's almost full. At another home, someone's burning cassava peels as a tiny flame offering. For clarity, the man explains, sometimes the tubes disagree. You ask the spirits to settle it. Later, you pass a boy gently shaking a short bamboo tube over his head like a rattle. You ask if it's part of a game. No, he says, completely serious. It's how I ask the wind if I can go fishing. Did it answer? He nods. It jiggled left. You don't question it. Because the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes. These aren't just cracked tubes. They're conduits between the people and the weather, the earth and the sky, the known and the slightly suspicious. And in a place where rain decides everything, asking permission feels like good manners. You end the day in the courtyard of a family preparing for the next full moon. They've placed 7 bamboo tubes around a central fire pit. Each one is wrapped in woven thread, not for function, for respect. And when the wind sighs across them like a distant breath, one lets out a tiny, perfect click. They all stop. Accepted. The grandmother says, you don't ask by whom. You just nod. Because somewhere, maybe in the trees, maybe in the air, something heard, and it said yes. By now you've learned not to question the logic of bamboo. You don't scoff at a crack. You don't rush a hum. And you definitely don't laugh when a rooster nods solemnly after a tube pops because, let's face it, that rooster might be more qualified than half the meteorologists you've met. Which brings you to a clearing filled with lanterns and snacks and what appears to be a debate in progress. Not a quiet, thoughtful one. A sweaty, snack-fueled, semi-theatrical shouting match between 2 entire villages. Welcome to the Great Tube Debate of 1872. You settle into the back of the crowd just in time to hear a white-haired man from the northern village proclaim, "Our bamboo cracked before sunrise." He slams his walking stick into the dirt like he just ended the argument. A ripple of gasps. Then, from the southern delegation, a younger man retorts, "Your bamboo cracked from age, not weather." He's holding a tube as evidence short, fat, clearly older than he is, wrapped in ceremonial cloth like it's on trial. You look around. Someone's selling skewers of grilled banana. Another person hands out little woven cones of peanuts. There are kids wearing homemade sashes that read Team North and Team South. A woman walks by offering coconut water with a wink. This is dead serious. but also a bit of a party. Turns out, each year during the transitional season, when dry gives way to wet and the weather can't decide if it wants to kiss you or punch you, to neighboring villages host a contest. Whose bamboo forecasted the first true rainfall? The stakes pride, bragging rights, and the loser has to host next year's cassava feast. Historians still argue whether this event began as genuine agricultural necessity or as a cleverly disguised opportunity for flirtation and fried snacks. Records suggest that in the 1872 instance, the northern village's bamboo cracked first, but the southern village's tube made a humming noise at a lower humidity level. Cue a philosophical meltdown. And here's your delightfully unnecessary fringe fact that year. Both villages submitted written statements to a Dutch administrator requesting an official ruling. The administrator, a man named Hendrik Maas, reportedly responded with, "I prefer not to be involved with plants that argue." Back in the clearing, someone has set up a bamboo xylophone. Two teenagers duel with wooden mallets, each trying to mimic the specific crackling tone of their village's forecast. One manages a perfect mid-tone pop, and the crowd erupts. The other just shrugs and eats another peanut. You make your way to a tent labeled Tube Archive, where villagers have brought their oldest, most trustworthy bamboo tubes to be displayed. Some are polished, others are cracked and stitched with copper wire. One has a tiny scroll tied to it with a red string. You lean in to read it. Cracked for the wedding, the harvest, and the eclipse. Do not question her. You don't. As the sun sinks lower and the heat lifts from the earth, a final round begins. Both villages place their best bamboo tube in the center of the clearing. Silence falls. You watch. You wait. Nothing. Then crack. Sharp. Clear. Musical. From the southern tube. The crowd breaks into cheers. Some cheer with joy. Some cheer through gritted teeth. An old man from the north throws his hat into the air. Fine, but next year we get the Deep Valley bamboo. As the debate dissolves into dancing and snack distribution, you lie back on a bamboo mat, lulled by the rhythm of rain that begins to tap gently on the roof of the festival tent. It's perfect, timed like theater. The sky always knows when to make an entrance, and so do the tubes. You hear one pop again in the distance, and everyone, even the losing village, claps. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning. It was about listening. Together. You're still wrapped in the warmth of last night's debate, your pockets lined with leftover peanuts. Your ears ringing faintly from a bamboo xylophone solo gone wildly off-tempo. The cassava feast has ended. The laughter's faded. But one question lingers in your sleepy mind as you trudge past more cracked, stacked, and serenely humming bamboo tubes. Are all bamboo tubes equal? Short answer. No. Long answer. Definitely. Absolutely. Hilariously not. Because today's walk brings you into the forested foothills where the villagers go to choose their bamboo. And from the very first moment you arrive, you realize this is less like picking firewood and more like matchmaking. You find a middle-aged man crouched at the base of a towering bamboo clump, head cocked to one side, eyes narrowed, gently tapping the stalk like he's trying to tell if it's fluent in humidity. He listens, knocks again, then nods. This one knows things. He says, you nod back, trying not to spook it. Because, as it turns out, not all bamboo species are cut out for weather prophecy. Some are too brittle, some too dense. Others absorb moisture so slowly they only crack once a year, and that one time usually coincides with the village cow sneezing. So no one takes it seriously. But a select few. They're naturals. Historians still argue whether the most reliable species, locally called bamboo patanda or sign bamboo, was cultivated deliberately or simply discovered by generations of trial, error, and politely insulting underperforming stalks. Some researchers claim genetic traits in certain regional bamboos make them more sensitive to shifts in barometric pressure. Others just call it very attentive grass. Your fringe fact today: one elder insisted the best bamboo only grows on east-facing slopes that have heard thunder before sunrise. You ask how they know which slopes qualify. He smiles. The trees whisper it to the bamboo. You believe him because it's too humid to argue. In the village workshop, tubes are cured carefully over low fires, then hung upside down to season. You watch as one woman oils her freshly cut tube with a mixture of coconut milk and ginger, so it won't get scared when it cracks. She explains, another man has carved notches along the spine of his tube to let the sound escape politely. You run your fingers along the outer edge of one half-finished tube and are startled when a soft, high-pitched ping vibrates up your arm. That one's impatient, the carver says. It wants to forecast by Thursday. There's a whole classification system here. Chatterers crack often and early. Growlers hum low, rumbling warnings. Whistlers make eerie tones before storms. And snobs, yes, they have those only crack during full moons and refuse to acknowledge small drizzle events. It's not science. It's not superstition. It's something else. A relationship. You step outside the workshop to find a small boy dragging 3 tubes behind him like reluctant puppies. This one's moody, he says, pointing to a short, wide one. This one Grandma says it's cursed. He beams. You wave at a pair of elders dragging a huge tube up the hill. It's nearly as tall as they are. Someone whispers, "That's the long one." You don't ask more? At the edge of the village, you meet a tube carver who doesn't name his pieces until they've cracked twice. First crack is luck. He explains. Second crack. That's personality. He leads you into his shed, where dozens of tubes hang like wind chimes. None are labeled. All are waiting. You don't force them, he says. You give them time. You listen. And when they speak, that's when you name them. Back in the clearing, someone strikes a hollow log to announce mealtime. All around you, the bamboo rests different lengths, shapes, ages, but united in purpose. Watching, measuring, anticipating. And you realize these aren't just sticks. They're instruments. And every crack is a solo, a message, a memory. Because not all bamboo is created equal. Some of it listens better. You wake to blue skies and suspiciously cheerful birdsong, always a red flag in a land where weather has a sense of humor, and humidity likes to sneak up behind you with a bucket. The villagers are moving slowly today, spreading grain on woven mats, fixing thatched roofs, and pretending the bamboo didn't misfire last night. Because sometimes even bamboo gets it wrong. And you're about to hear every excuse in the book. Welcome to the world of monsoons, magic, and misreadings. It starts with a tube that cracked just after sundown. Loud, clear, no doubt about it. 3 elders heard it. One child claimed it scared their goat. A rooster panicked. Everyone nodded sagely and said, "Rain before sunrise." So the tarps went up. The seeds were covered. Laundry stayed indoors. A few people even declined invitations to a neighboring village's feast, citing bamboo certainty. And then nothing. Not even dew. By morning, The only water in sight is someone's spilled coconut drink and the tears of a man who missed fried cassava night. You sit beside a group of villagers gathered under the shade of a banana tree, holding what appears to be a bamboo-themed post-mortem. It cracked too early. Someone says, "No, it cracked from heat stress," offers another. "It cracked because the wind was from the west, and we know how west wind lies. My uncle's tube always cracked early during mango season," adds a teen who has no idea how mangoes relate to meteorology. Someone else says, "The frogs didn't stop croaking. That was the sign we missed." You raise an eyebrow. They ignore you. Historians still argue whether misfires were acknowledged in traditional weather lore or cleverly edited out of the oral record. Some suggest villagers had systems for classifying false cracks and adjusting forecasts accordingly. Others claim communities just laughed it off and made new bamboo tubes with slightly better attitudes. Your favorite fringe fact for today: one regional tale tells of a bamboo tube that cracked 3 nights in a row without rain. The villagers exiled it to a mountaintop. It cracked once more on the way up. Rain followed within minutes. They carried it back down on a woven mat and renamed it the Regretful One. You walk through the market where merchants have already turned today's wrong crack into banter. A fish seller yells, "Buy now," before the bamboo lies again. A fruit vendor adds, "Discounts for those brave enough to ignore the sky." Meanwhile, someone's carved. Still dry. Ask again later into their weather tube. But not all reactions are jokes. One elder solemnly retires her bamboo tube after its second misfire this season. She places it in the rafters above her door and whispers, "Thank you for trying." A younger relative quietly installs a new one with cautious optimism. And over in the temple grove, a priest performs a small ritual, not punishment, not scolding, just a quiet request for clearer signals next time. An offering of rice, a single marigold, and a soft tune hummed into the wind. Because here's the truth. Even a good bamboo tube is still just a voice. Not an oracle, not a god, just a messenger from the air. And sometimes messages get scrambled. Humidity fakes you out. Wind shifts. The sky stays dry. But the system holds. Because people here know bamboo may crack too soon. Or not at all, but they're still listening. Still learning. You find a boy tinkering with the new design shorter. Angled, drilled with holes like a flute. This one sings. He says, "Not for rain. Just for fun." You ask what he'll do if it predicts wrong. He shrugs. "I'll ask nicer next time." You smile, pat the tube, and walk on. Because that's the heart of it. When nature misleads you, you don't throw out the system. You adjust your ear. You've passed the cassava stalls, the alley of sleeping goats, and one very proud child showing off a weather tube carved with his own name, Aditya the Moisture Master. His mother rolls her eyes, but the tube did hum before dawn, so she lets it slide. Now you find yourself at the edge of the village, standing outside a modest, pale yellow house with a bamboo rack mounted above the door. The tubes here are cleaner, marked, even tagged with little wooden tokens numbered and dated. And sitting cross-legged in the doorway is a man in wire-rimmed glasses, flipping through a brittle leather notebook. He's humming softly and jotting something in Dutch. You've just met one of history's more curious figures, the colonial scientist who added bamboo tubes to his weather station. You introduce yourself quietly. He doesn't look up. Humidity rose overnight. That's tube number 3's second crack this month. His voice is calm, almost affectionate. You glance at the bamboo behind him. They're numbered, labeled, positioned carefully for airflow and angle of light. The man finally turns and offers his name, Jakob Elias Hiren. Meteorologist, translator, collector of unusual truths. He gestures for you to sit. You do. And then he begins to tell his story gently, with pauses between thoughts like he's waiting for the tubes to approve each sentence. Jakob was posted to Java in 1889 with a mandate: modernize regional meteorology, install barometers, build rain gauges, teach the locals how weather really works. What he didn't expect was to be routinely outpredicted by barefoot farmers with sticks and sarcastic chickens. His turning point: a failed expedition into the uplands, heavy fog, sudden rain, soaked maps, but a nearby village bone dry. Why their tubes cracked 2 days earlier? Jakob says, they canceled travel. We didn't. From then on, he began documenting bamboo behavior, cross-referencing crack times with humidity readings, creating comparison tables between traditional observations and colonial instruments. Historians still argue whether Jakob's work was accepted by the colonial administration or quietly ignored. Some say his reports were filed and forgotten. Others believe they subtly influenced later regional forecasting models, especially in agricultural districts. Either way, Jakob kept listening. And your delicious fringe footnote today, Jakob published one handwritten manuscript titled Sound and Sap Notes on Indigenous Weather Knowledge. Only 3 copies survive. One is rumored to hum when left near fresh-cut bamboo. You flip through one of Jakob's remaining notebooks now. It's full of neat sketches tubes with airflow diagrams. Notes like Tube 7 cracked 2x pre-dawn, 1 hum post-noon. Wind NNW, rain came from ESE. Curious misdirection. Elder's tube hummed all night, possibly morning. Jakob didn't just study bamboo, he respected it. He tells you about his integration station, a small hut where modern tools shared space with traditional ones. Barometer on one shelf, weather tubes on the other. One morning, the barometer registered no change. The tube cracked 3 times. By lunch, the downpour began. He leans in and whispers, I never argued with it again. Outside, a breeze stirs. One of his tubes lets out a low plonk. Jakob pauses, tilts his head, then scribbles another note. That's the petulant one. You smile before you leave. He gives you a parting thought. Our mistake, he says, was trying to replace their methods. We should have been adding to them. You look around at the tubes, the wind, the soft chatter of villagers prepping for the next harvest. And you realize Jakob wasn't just a scientist, he was a listener. The kind who understood that knowledge doesn't always come from a laboratory. Sometimes it hums through hollow wood. The wind has shifted, not in a grand, sweeping gesture, but subtly, like it's turning a page you weren't quite finished reading. You walk now through a newer part of the village, where the houses have concrete walls, where satellite dishes tilt toward invisible news, and where air conditioning units hum faintly above front doors. And here the bamboo tubes are gone. Not all of them, but most. This is the slow unraveling. The decline wires, radios, and concrete roofs. You pause by a home where a child is poking a tablet screen, tapping through an app with a grinning cloud icon. The app says chance of rain 30%. Above them, the sky is moody, swollen, full of unspoken plans. You ask the child if they've heard of bamboo weather tubes. They squint. You mean those noisy sticks my grandma used to hang on the porch? Yes, those. You keep walking, and the concrete under your feet feels harder than before, less forgiving. The world here has been tiled, wired, connected. Rain arrives now via forecast alerts and text messages. The sound of bamboo cracking has been replaced with the ding of a weather notification. Progress, they call it. Historians still argue when exactly the bamboo system began fading. Some suggest the decline started after World War II, when post-colonial modernization swept across Southeast Asia. Others point to the 1970s, when mass-manufactured thermometers and transistor radios became widely available in rural areas. Your favorite fringe explanation. One village elder swore it was the arrival of corrugated metal roofs that broke the cycle. You can't hear the tubes over all that clanging, he said. Rain used to whisper. Now it bangs like a pot lid in a fight. You stop in front of a locked shed, through the window. You spot what looks like a weathered bamboo rack, dust-covered, but still upright. Tubes stacked in the corner, forgotten but not broken. One has a red ribbon tied around it. Someone loved it once. Farther along, you meet a retired schoolteacher tending to a flower bed. She sees you looking at her porch, where a single bamboo tube still hangs. Does it still crack, you ask? Not for me, she says. But sometimes it hums when the power goes out. She chuckles softly, then adds, My grandson thinks it's haunted. The truth is, many villagers stopped using the tubes not because they didn't believe in them, but because they didn't need them. Roofs no longer leak. Rice fields are machine irrigated. Flood alerts arrive via SMS and bamboo. It doesn't beep. It doesn't scroll. It doesn't glow in the dark. It just waits. And sometimes, that's not fast enough. Still, you notice signs of quiet resistance. One man has repurposed his tubes as wind chimes for memory. He says, A grandmother tells bedtime stories that always begin with a bamboo that cracked before a wedding. And on the temple wall, someone's carved a phrase in both Old Javanese and modern Bahasa Indonesia. If the tube still listens, so should we. You spend the evening in a new-build cafe with plastic chairs and Wi-Fi, sipping cold tea as a storm rolls in. The weather app buzzes. The patrons groan. But as the first thunderclap echoes, a faint pop sounds from the roof. You look up. One bamboo tube, old, cracked, still hanging in the corner beam, and smiling slightly in the flicker of lightning. Because even now, even here, even surrounded by algorithms and touchscreens, the bamboo remembers. The next morning, you wake to the smell of damp concrete and blooming frangipani. Somewhere nearby, someone is frying tempeh, and the distant whoop of a scooter horn signals life returning to its modern rhythm. But you have an appointment not with a meteorologist or a mystic, but with a teenager. Because today's story lives in the attic. You follow a narrow alley past rows of tiled houses until you find one painted sky blue, with a sagging clothesline and a slightly suspicious cat guarding the front step. Inside, it smells like turmeric and old paper. You're here to meet Ratri, a high school student who, in the process of looking for her missing phone charger, stumbled upon a dusty bamboo tube tucked behind a sewing machine, which leads us to today's Chapter 1 tube left in the attic. Ratri greets you with wide eyes and paint-stained fingers. She waves you upstairs and points at the bundle laid gently on a woven mat 3 tubes, still bound together with frayed string, their surfaces etched with nearly invisible carvings. I thought it was junk, she says. Then I Googled it. Bless her. It turns out these tubes once belonged to her great-grandmother, who was well known in her village for predicting weather by wood and wind. No one in the family used them anymore, but no one threw them out either. They just lived here. Ratri says, quietly not being smartphones? One night during monsoon season, the power went out. Ratri lit a candle, climbed into the attic to find an old flashlight and heard a sound. Pop, followed by a soft, whistling hum. It scared me. She laughs. I thought it was a rat with a flute. But then she noticed the air. Heavy. Electric. She told her parents. They shrugged. It rained 2 hours later. That was the beginning. Historians still argue whether these rediscoveries count as preservation or revival. Some say that traditional tools can't truly return once the culture that sustained them fades. Others argue that even partial memory revived through curiosity is enough to keep something alive. Your favorite fringe moment here? Ratri made a TikTok video of the tube cracking. It got 43,000 views and one comment that simply said, "Bro, is your attic sentient?" You ask what happened next. I started testing it, she says. Every night. I made a spreadsheet. She shows you the notebook. Dates, time of crack, type of sound, humidity reading from her phone's weather app, rainfall recorded next morning. She grins, it's weirdly accurate. One teacher was so impressed. He encouraged her to turn it into a science fair project. Her title, Traditional Acoustic Biomaterials as Hyperlocal Atmospheric Predictors. Translation: Why my grandma's tube is smarter than a weather app. You help her gently clean one of the tubes, wiping away years of dust and forgotten family dinners. You find a carved symbol barely visible. She traces it. That's my great-grandma's name. She whispers, I think this one was her favorite. You ask what she plans to do with them. Not much. She shrugs. Just keep listening. Later that evening, you sit with her family as the wind picks up. Her grandfather watches Ratri hang the tube back in the attic window, now tied with a fresh red ribbon. He nods. Doesn't say much. But when the tube hums low, soft, almost like a throat clearing, he smiles. And in that moment, the attic becomes a weather station again. No wires, no satellites, just memory and attention, and the patience to hear wood speak. The rain comes lightly that night, just enough to slick the stones and give the banana leaves something to gossip about. You sit under the eaves of Ratri's house with a cup of warm tea and a cat who has decided you're trustworthy. The bamboo tube in the attic lets out one final, satisfied tick, then goes quiet. And somewhere, as your eyes begin to close, you wonder what else did the bamboo remember. The next day, you travel upriver with a local researcher named Adi, an ethnobotanist with mud-stained boots, a sun hat too big for his head, and a deep love for ancient plants with excellent timing. He's part of a small team doing something quietly radical. They're re-listening to bamboo. Because in the age of satellite imaging and predictive models, someone finally asked, what if the old knowledge was right all along? Which brings you to the rise of a curious new field. Using traditional bamboo indicators as climate data, Adi explains it over breakfast between bites of jackfruit pancake and long-winded digressions about frog migration patterns. It's not about nostalgia, he says. It's about micro-patterns, hyper-local cues, stuff satellites miss. He's been working with villagers across Java, Sulawesi, and Sumatra recording bamboo behavior, correlating cracks and hums with rainfall, temperature shifts, even pollen counts. Some tubes crack before a rain. Others crack when humidity changes before a dry spell. It's nuance. Historians still argue whether this constitutes real science or cultural weather anecdotes. Adi shrugs. Science is just listening with paperwork. He shows you his logbook page after page of bamboo entries. Date, sound, direction the tube faced, type of cut, nearby vegetation. This one, he says, tapping a line, only cracks when the wind comes from two directions. It's basically a wooden weather crossroads. Your fringe joy today. In one village, Adi discovered a carved stone marker from 1823 with a stylized bamboo tube etched on its face. Beneath it we knew, but only if we stayed quiet. You follow him to a test site, a field station perched on the edge of a mangrove swamp. There's a metal hut filled with instruments, and beside it a bamboo rack. 5 tubes, clean, labeled, watching. A digital hygrometer ticks quietly on the wall. The bamboo doesn't tick, but it cracks. Once, then again. Adi writes it down, smiles, matches the forecast. But we heard it first. You pass a field notebook to a graduate student nearby. She's mapping bamboo crack timings against wind shifts. It's weird. She admits, but consistent. Like the stalks are talking to each other. Another researcher adds, we think the internodes act like resonant chambers, natural barometers. The cracks aren't random, they're calibrated by nature. You nod slowly, because it makes sense. Not mystical sense. Real sense. Sound as data, humidity as signal, rain as the punctuation mark at the end of the sentence. You sit beneath the tree as evening sets in, a bird calls, a frog answers. The bamboo rack cracks once more. Everyone looks up. No one speaks. And you realize this isn't revival. This isn't nostalgia. It's a conversation restarted because the bamboo didn't forget. It just needed someone to listen again. It's your last night in the village. The air is warm and weighty, thick with the perfume of cloves and cooking fires, and the low, familiar rustle of banana leaves turning in their sleep. You sit under the stars with Ratri and her grandfather, a small oil lamp between you, and above, just out of sight, the attic tube hangs waiting, always, for its moment. You lean back and look at the night sky, almost too still to trust. No wind, no frogs, no cicadas. But if you listen closely, something else stirs. A hum, a slight tremble, a single crack, and like a whispered joke between the stars and the earth. You understand the tube doesn't lie, but it listens. All around the archipelago, the old bamboo tubes are still there, some buried in attics, others tied to trees, a few enshrined in temples, their voices growing soft but not silent. People don't always understand them anymore, but that doesn't stop them from remembering. Somewhere, a grandmother still taps her bamboo with the back of a spoon each morning before deciding whether to wash clothes. In a university lab, a weather scientist rereads field notes from a village that predicted a monsoon 10 hours before radar caught the cloud front. And in a quiet alley, a child ties red thread to a tube that's never cracked, but somehow feels ready to. Historians, scientists, skeptics, they all have their theories. But the bamboo has its rhythm, its language, its memory, and it isn't in a hurry to explain itself, because the best kind of knowledge doesn't shout. It waits. It watches. It listens. And when the time is right, it speaks. One crack at a time. So now, close your eyes. Let the night settle like warm rain across your shoulders. Let the hum of old bamboo and gentle memory wash through the back of your thoughts. You're no longer sitting in a village. You're lying beneath trees that remember. roots twining through generations, leaves heavy with stories, tubes that don't just forecast, they recall. You breathe in deep air thick with night and the last echo of thunder still curling on the horizon. There's no need for urgency now. No charts, no alerts, no blinking red lights or weather warnings scrolling across glass screens. Only sound, only stillness. Only the soft, patient truth of something ancient and hollow, filled with the breath of the sky. Maybe it hums tonight. Maybe it waits. Maybe tomorrow. It will crack, clear and sharp, before the clouds have made up their minds. And maybe you'll remember what it feels like to trust something slow, something rooted, something not built by wires or downloaded in patches. You'll remember that you don't need to know everything in advance, just enough to listen and enough to rest. So breathe and drift. The rain won't come just yet, but when it does, you'll be ready, because the bamboo already knows.